Happy that we're here for another Sabbath. This Torah portion is an interesting one. I guess terrifying in some sense, depending on who you are. But this is the portion Korah, and it talks about the rebellion of Korah and his band. And this is in Numbers chapter 16, verse 1 through chapter 18, verse 32. And it starts off listing, again, the names of the people that were involved in this, as well as the names of their fathers and the tribes that they're from. And what you see is you actually have two groups that kind of led up this rebellion, and then you have the 250 elders of Israel who join along. But the two groups you have are Korah, and then from Levi, and then you have a couple people from the tribe of Reuben. And so what you have is Korah, son of Izar, son of Kohath, son of Levi. So he's actually from the tribe of Levi. And Levi, as you know, is the tribe that was set apart to the priesthood as part of the tribe of Levi, but they're also set apart to take care of the tabernacle and essentially move everything in the wilderness as the tent was moving with the Israelites. He took himself, along with Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, son of Peleth. These are descendants of Reuben. So the majority here are actually the sons of Reuben, and Korah, who's of Levi, is kind of like the band leader. Now, Korah's name means ice, which I find very, very interesting. His father's name means oil, could be like in the sense of anointing oil, and his grandfather's name, Kohath, means to ally oneself. And so it's really interesting that he's completely departed from this. He's not allying himself. He's actually going against Yahweh's priesthood by speaking out against Moshe and Aaron. And Moshe and Aaron, Aaron and his sons had been anointed in oil when they were given the priesthood. That story is told in the names of Korah's father and grandfather. But then you have him, who is ice. Dathan and Abiram are sons of Eliab. And Dathan, that name has an uncertain derivation. I couldn't find out what it means. Abiram means a father of height, and Eliab means God of his father. On means ability, power, wealth, force. He's the son of Peleth, which has the connotation of fleeing or swiftness. And you can see that this is really this desire of power, this jealousy that they weren't set aside as much as Aaron and his sons were. Even though they were extra special among the community of Israel, they seemed to be blinded to this fact. They wanted all of it. It wasn't enough to have what they had been given. And I just want to read verse 3, verses. There's a lot of verse in this sentence. Verse 3 in contrast to verses 8 through 9. So in verse 3, here's what these rebellious men are saying. They're talking to Moshe and Aaron. They combined against Moshe and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. For all the community are holy, all of them, and Yahweh is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourself above Yahweh's congregation?" Which is really funny that they say this, because they're saying, oh, it's not us. We're fighting for the community. Everyone is holy. But then read verses 8 through 9. This is Moshe's response. "Is it not enough for you that the Elohim of Israel has set you apart from the community of Israel and given you access to him to perform the duties of Yahweh's tabernacle and to minister to the community and serve them?" So he's kind of turning their words right back on to them. He's saying, is it enough for you to minister to the community and to serve them? And that's kind of what they claim they're doing, because they're saying, oh, all of the community, is set apart. And they're doing it in a way that, at least to me, I read it as they're saying, see, we're not thinking of ourselves here. We're just thinking of the community, and look at how this looks, and it's unfair to everyone. But Moshe is wise, and he understands that it really is just their own greed and need for power and being set apart that's putting them in this situation. Now, here's the solution. Moshe says, okay, we're gonna let God do it. He's gonna show really who is the set apart one and who he chooses. This is not something we chose. We're just doing it because he told us to. And so the idea is that not just Korah and Dathan and Abiram and On and the others would go, but the 250 elders that they got to join them would also go with fire pans, with incense to make an offering before Yahweh. And then Yahweh would show who was the chosen one. But when he called them, those of Levi, Korah's band, came. But the Reubenites did not. Dathan and Abiram and their families, they didn't leave their tents. And interestingly enough, they are the ones who are destroyed first. And what we see in verse 23 is that Yahweh is saying, okay, tell everybody to get away from their dwellings because I'm going to destroy them, and anybody who's too close is going to get destroyed along with them. I think that's a good spiritual lesson that we can take, right? If somebody is non-repentant and they are wicked, and by wicked I mean unrighteous. I don't mean wicked by today's sense of the word per se. That certainly falls into it, but wickedness is just not following the righteousness of Yahweh. That's leaven that you don't want to get by. That can affect you. That can cause you to die spiritually. And so you have to get away from that. So Yahweh says, withdraw from about their abodes. And they do. And essentially what happens is the earth swallows them up alive. They go down into Sheol alive. In verse 30, it says, they had spurned Yahweh. So even though they made it seem like they were spurning men, Moshe and Aaron, what they had really done was spurned Yahweh. And why? Well, because Yahweh is the one that appointed Moshe and Aaron. And so we need to take care there too. If somebody really has been appointed by Yahweh and has been sent into our lives to give a message, whether it's to us or to other members of the community, children of Yahweh, if we speak out against them, we're really speaking out against Yahweh. And that's a really serious offense. So we need to remember that and take care with that. Once the earth swallowed up the Reubenites who had been involved in this rebellion, then fire came down and consumed those 250 men in their fire pans. And this reminded me of the death of Aaron's sons who had been consumed by the fire when they brought forth fire that hadn't been ordained through Yahweh. And this is the same thing. These men were not ordained by Yahweh for the priesthood. So the offering they brought had not been ordained by Yahweh because they themselves weren't ordained. They didn't fit into the order. And so they were destroyed by the fire just like Aaron's sons were. Now what's interesting is that the pans that had been used they're now considered kadosh, set apart, sacred, because they had been used as an offering for Yahweh. So even though the offering wasn't ordained by him and ultimately resulted in death of the people doing the offering, those items are now set apart. And so they are instructed, Aaron's son Eleazar is instructed to hammer them out and to flatten them and to cover the altar with them. And that's what he does. Now, what's very interesting is there's another, again, this is like the community of Israel. They just don't get it. The very next day after all this happens, they're mad. Look, you brought death on us. No, we didn't. You guys did. Or those people brought the death on themselves. And so, of course, Yahweh gets angry at this, and Moshe is pleading that there's not total destruction. And so, once again, Yahweh has to show, he's the one who's ordaining these people. They're not choosing themselves. This is not something that man has done. This is something that has come about through the power and the ordination of Yahweh himself. And this time he does it through the staffs. And so each tribe of the 12 tribes is to bring a staff, including Aaron for the tribe of Levi. And those staffs are placed before the altar overnight. And the next day is Aaron's staff that has budded with flowers, and it has produced almonds. What's really interesting here is that Aaron's staff is to go back. They're supposed to put it back where it was, which is in before the pact, so before the covenant of Yahweh. Sorry, not the altar. I said altar before, I meant the pact, the covenant. And it says here that it's kept as a lesson to the rebels. And there's a similar verbiage that's used for plating the altar with the fire pans. It says, it's a reminder to the Israelites so that no outsider should presume to offer incense before Yahweh and suffer the fate of Korah and his band. In other words, no one who hasn't been appointed to that position. When it comes to the staff, it's serving as a reminder. And it's interesting how it says it here. It says, to be kept as a lesson to rebels, so that their mutterings against me may cease, lest they die. And I was wondering about this. It's like, why would it be a reminder to them? Because they can't see it anyway, really. I mean, the people who are seeing that every day are the ones with the access to that part of the tabernacle, the priesthood. They don't need a reminder. They're not the ones who rebelled. So I was wondering, especially if you think about what some of the sacrifices are for, is to cleanse the altar of the uncleanliness. I'm wondering if it's actually a reminder to Yahweh, and something that's actually used to cleanse, remove the evidence and the effects of the rebellion, and thus protect the community. And if you read the King James Version of this verse, it kind of agrees with that. It says, this is chapter 17, verse 10. It says, and Yahweh said unto Moses, bring Aaron's rod again before the testimony, to be kept for a token against the rebels. And you shall take away their murmurings from me, that they die not. And so that fits with the idea that placing that staff there above the pact or the covenant, what that's doing is removing the stain of their murmurings and thus protecting them from death. And so, just an alternative interpretation. I don't know if I'm correct or not, but based on what I've learned from other portions of Scripture, it seems to synergize with that idea. But there could be something I'm missing. So please, don't take my word for it. Study it out for yourself. And then the Torah portion ends with essentially talking about the Levites and what's set aside for them. The fact that they don't have an inheritance in the land because Yahweh and their job taking care of the tabernacle and essentially protecting the community by making expiation for them and doing the sacrifices, that's their inheritance. And what's very interesting is that everything that's said to be set apart for Yahweh, these offerings, the elevations, things that are prescribed for him, like the firstborn, it actually says that they belong to the Levites. The Levites are the ones eating the sacrifice. So it's very interesting to me that they're like, I don't know what the best way to say this is, but that gift and that offering was dedicated for Yahweh, but they are the physical form that is benefiting from that gift. And I think there's a greater significance there. And I'm not totally sure what it is. Maybe it has something to do with Yeshua and the Father in their relationship with one another. I'm not going to get into a Trinity argument right now, but maybe that has something to do with it. And the other thing I found very interesting is this concept of the tithe of the tithe. That's what I'm calling it. It's not like some terminology or verbiage that I got from somewhere. But if you read chapter 18, verse 25 through 28, it says, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Levites and say to them, when you receive from the Israelites their tithes. So the tithes are coming from the Israelites to the Levites, which I have assigned to you as your share. You shall set aside from them 1/10 of the tithe as a gift to Yahweh. So they've gotten the tithe, which is already a set apart portion, and now they're setting apart a part of that again. So it says, this shall be accounted to you as your gift, which makes sense. How else can they bring a tithe? They can't, because what they're doing every day is working in the sanctuary. They're not farming. They're not harvesting. They're not producing livestock or or fruits of the vine or anything like that. So their tithe comes from what they get from the Israelites' tithe. It says, as with the new grain from the threshing floor flow from the vat, so shall you on your part set aside a gift for Yahweh from all the tithes that you receive from the Israelites. The best portion, that's set aside to Yahweh, and that cannot be eaten. But anything else from that tithe that comes from the Israelites can be eaten by the priesthood. So I had never actually noticed that before or realized that before. I knew that the tithe had been brought to the priesthood. I didn't realize that they tithed from that tithe. And I find it beautiful that Yahweh gives a way for the Levites to obey the command to bring forth a tithe when they otherwise really couldn't obey that law. And Yahweh does provide in that way. There are plenty of times, situations in my life that I thought back on later and realized how He had protected me without me even knowing it from breaking His commands, and essentially preserved me and allowed me to uphold His commands, sometimes even before I realized that even was one of His commands. One example that I can think of is observing the Sabbath. When I was in high school, I went to a non-denominational Christian church with my boyfriend's family, and this church had services on Saturday evening, I guess. Don't want to say night. And Sunday. And my boyfriend's parents preferred to go on Saturday night just because they wanted the whole Sunday available to them to do whatever. And I would go with them on Saturday nights. So even then, He was helping me observe His Sabbath before I even recognized it and realized the importance of it. And there are several examples like that that have happened in my life. And I bet if you thought about it, you could identify some in your own life. So I thought that was a really nice way to end the Torah portion, at least for me, because I could really connect it to my own personal experiences as well. So I hope you enjoyed this portion. I had some interesting revelations out of it myself. As usual, I'm having a lot of fun with it, seeing what new things I'm learning and what new revelations I'm receiving, because it's different every year. And as always, feel free to make comments, share your own revelations with me. I'd love to hear them and augment my own learning. And so Shabbat Shalom, and have a good week until next Sabbath.